hypothesis is that offensive, large militaries are more likely to be involved in international wars than relatively smaller militaries. Over the course of the semester, we spent researching and analyzing data to determine if larger countries with larger militaries tend to engage in more military conflicts internationally. From our research, we determined that it is true. Offensive militaries that are proportionally large in population tend to most likely be involved in international affairs. For our purposes of our theory, we have defined war as involving in the organized use of military force by at least two different parties in a relatively large scale. As we start to talk about our war history, you will notice a time frame between 1850 to present time of the amount of wars there have been throughout the years.
The countries we looked at were the United States, China, Moldova, and Iceland. And the reason why we chose these four states is because the United States and China have two of the largest military sizes in the world, compared to Moldova and Iceland that have the smallest military sizes in the world. China and the United States have significantly larger military than Moldova and Iceland. These states' entanglements in international affairs are directly correlated with their military strength and ability.
Let's start off by looking at Iceland. Iceland had a total of 100 military personnel in the year 1995 compared to 250 military personnel in the year 2015. Iceland is a very isolationist nation and hasn't been involved in many foreign affairs due to its almost non-existent military. In terms of war history, Iceland has not been involved in high-casualty wars since the 1950s. Although Iceland has been actively involved in NATO, its prevalent relations in international disputes or civil wars is none. This evidence is important because this proves that Iceland is a small country with a small military, and it does not have the power to fight in wars.
China currently has 1.6 military active troops. In total, they have been increasing their economic funds more on the military technology rather than military troops and field combat divisions. In total, China has been involved in 3 wars: the Korean War, Vietnam War, and Siamese War. Between 1950 and 1979, all these 3 wars happened, and currently they haven't been involved in any. Most wars have been fought with allies, the North Korea and South Vietnam, in order to pursue communism around the world. In the Korean War, 48,000 military troops were killed and a total of 800 soldiers were active during that time in need. At the end of it, it resulted in the 38th parallel, which was in the borderline between North and South Korea, in which the Chinese did not reclaim victory. China was also involved in the Vietnam War, which happened in 1954 to 1975. In the middle of this war, 320,000 military troops were sent in response to being allies with South Vietnam. North Vietnam, being the enemy, was also involved with the United States, who wanted to be Democrat. At the end, it resulted in South Vietnam winning, and it is unknown how many military troops. The last major war that China was involved in was the Siamese War, which happened in 1979. This happened after the Vietnam War, in which China was noticing that the Soviet Union was having traditional influence on Vietnam, and China didn't like it. So at the end of it all, they sent 200,000 troops in a surprise attack to attack Vietnam and to show them who has more power and who they should follow more, which was China. Overall, through the Korean War and the Siamese War, you can see that they have been growing in size and population.
Up next is Moldova. Moldova is also a relatively small country with a small military size. Moldova has only been involved in 2 military affairs since 1950. In 1980 was their independence war, where they fought along with only 15,000 soldiers at the time. Over the years, Moldova's military has increased alongside their population. In 2003 to 2011, they were involved in the Iraq War as allies with the United States. Now there are about 1 million active soldiers who are on active duty. Proportionately, their population size has grown with their military.
The last country that we analyzed was the United States. Since the 1950s, the size of the United States military has been fluctuating, going from 3,302,104 military personnel in 1954 to 1,354,054 military personnel in 2014. The size of the military is also significantly affected by the ideologies of the time period and the people in power. It is important to keep that in mind. In the 1950s, America was fighting in the Cold War, with every citizen fearing a nuclear attack from the Soviet Union. Due to this, the military size was significantly larger than it was at any other time period in history, both because of this threat and the desire to keep communism at bay. Nevertheless, the size of the military affects the power of the military, and a country with a powerful military will go to war. Since the 1950s, the United States has been involved in 8 major wars. Between 1950 and 2011, the size of the U.S. military fluctuated under different administrations due to different policies, which resulted in either cuts or increases in military spending. We researched the size of the U.S. military during certain years, especially the years in which the United States was involved in these major wars, and we looked for a correlation between military size and military involvement. From these findings, we found that in 1985, the United States had 2,151,600 military personnel compared to 1,347,300 military personnel in 2015. The number of American troops who fought in the Vietnam War fluctuated during the United States' involvement in this international affair. In 1964, 23,300 soldiers fought in this war compared to 485,600 troops in 1967. By 1972, the number of American troops in Vietnam had been reduced to 24,200. At the start of this international conflict, which was towards the end of 1975, 2,935,107 troops were involved in this conflict, compared to 1,518,224 troops who were enrolled in the military at the end of this conflict in 1995. In the Afghan War, the number of American troops on Afghan soil went from 30,000 to 100,000 between the years of 2002 and 2011. The American military had a total of 1,385,116 troops at the start of the war in 2001. That number fell to 1,354,054 troops who were employed by the U.S. military towards the end of the war in 2014. At the start of the conflict in Iraq in 2003, 1,434,377 people were employed by the U.S. military. 1,425,113 people were employed in the military in 2011 when this war ended.
Ultimately, the proportion between a state in relevance to its military size and capability is a direct correlation between how many wars a country fights in. A state's motivating force is the engagement in international affairs, depending on their military size. It increases a state's advantage or likelihood to go to war, which allows them to reinforce their beliefs and ideologies. Our proposed hypothesis takes into account the size of a country's military and the ability for them engaging into international wars. If a country has a small military who, let's say, is on the defensive side and their military is less capable than that of a country with a larger military and an offensive mindset, which affects a country's likelihood of going to war. Over the years, these states have increased in population and overall military efforts proportionately, and their ideologies can provide a motivating force on why they engage in international affairs.